For 3-2 to share the testimony, a long journey to know the one true God and his son. Lori from Georgia, or please take the time.
Hi, my name is Lori Cole, and my testimony starts at the very beginning. I was born in 1961 in San Diego, California, and I was very blessed to have been raised in a loving Christian home, the youngest of 6 children. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior at the young age of 5. I was so excited about Jesus and shared the good news with my girlfriend, who also accepted Jesus into her heart. I enjoyed going to church and prayer meetings and always felt God's presence watching over me, guiding and protecting me. One time when I was about 7 or 8, I remember the pastor was preaching on the 10 Commandments, and my mom opened my Bible to Exodus 20 and put it on my lap, and I began to read. When I got to the 4th commandment, I counted the days of the week on my fingers. And I leaned over and patted my mom on her arm and whispered, "Mom, why do we go to church on Sunday?" She answered, "We go to church on Sunday in honor of Jesus' resurrection." And so I didn't give it another thought. At age 13, my parents were tragically killed in an airplane accident. My eldest brother, Dan, who was 29 at the time, and his wife, Linda, came to live with me and my other brother, so that we didn't have to leave our home or change schools. I did not understand how God could allow this to happen. I was very angry and drifted from the Lord. I started smoking marijuana, stealing, and drinking alcohol. I was always getting into trouble, it seemed. It was when I was on restriction and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere or do anything that I sat in the family room staring at the large bookcase before me. My eyes were drawn to a small brown book and discovered it was a New Living Bible that had my mother's handwritten name and address in it. I felt impressed that this was the last gift from my parents, but of course, really a gift from God. I started reading it and it changed my life. I was baptized in the Baptist church when I was 15 years old. How happy I was to have found again the joy of the Lord. But as I read my Bible, I began to notice inconsistencies between what the Bible taught and what the church taught. I wondered, how could my parents be happy in heaven when they can see all the terrible things going on down here? And why would God send the people who have died and gone to heaven back into the ground so they could be raised to meet him in the air? Referring to 1 Thessalonians 4:16, 17. And another question I had, why do we go to church on Sunday when the 10 Commandments speak of another day? I prayed for understanding and more truth. Unfortunately, though, it wasn't too long before I again fell away and started to drink. I met my future husband when I was 16. I moved in with him when I was 18. I knew it was wrong and not pleasing to the Lord. And at one point, I decided that I was going to move out. But my brother-in-law told me that in God's eyes, we were already married. That was what I wanted to hear. And so I stayed. We were married when I was 21, about 3 years later. One day, our landlord invited me to go to his church, and so I did. The service lasted 3 hours, but the pastor only spoke for about 20 minutes. So the rest of the time was singing while people swayed and danced and laid in the aisles while speaking in tongues. I was shocked. Later, my landlord told me that if I say what he says, and he said some gibberish, I could not repeat it, and to repeat it over and over again, then I would be speaking in tongues. I knew this was not right nor biblical. I kept praying for more truth and wisdom, according to James 1:5. In 1985, we moved to San Marcos, and I started attending Emmanuel Faith, a large community church in Escondido. But I needed something more than going to church just once a week. So I began to pray for a Bible study, and I received 2 answers to that prayer. 2 ladies from the church knocked on my door and offered to do Bible studies with me. And I also received the next day, after I started praying, in my mailbox, an invitation to attend a Revelation seminar. I decided to do the Revelation study. I showed it to my Aunt Serena, the brochure, and she said to not go or I would become one of them. I answered that my mom taught me sola scriptura, to follow the scriptures alone, and that I would compare everything I learned to the Bible to see if it was so. And that's what I did. The Revelation seminar opened my eyes to the truth of God's word and the errors of the church. I was so excited to finally find the truth. I told my family that I found a church that follows the Bible. I was baptized again, but this time into the San Marcos Seventh-day Adventist Church. I felt that I had finally come home. One of my brothers did recognize the truth and also became an SDA, but my other siblings were not interested. I shared with my aunt about the 10 Commandments, and she replied, "No one can keep the 10 Commandments." Well, when I was a new member, I was given a spiritual gift test, and it was a very comprehensive test, about 100 questions. And it showed that I had the gift of helps, administration, and surprisingly, my strongest point was exhortation. I enjoyed many years of fellowship in the church and was blessed with 2 beautiful children, a girl, Kendra, and my boy, Devin. I eventually switched to the Escondido church so that my kids could be around more children. The San Marcos church was a very small church with mostly elderly people. There were no young children there. And so they also attended EAA, Escondido Adventist Academy. So that was a good move for me. My husband was not a believer, nor did he like to go to church. So it was always a struggle for me to get the young children ready for church. But I persisted, and I am blessed with 2 amazing adult children that believe in the one true God and his son, Jesus Christ. We went through some tough years of dealing with my husband's alcoholism, the troublous teen years, and losing my sister to leukemia. I learned at a young age that time was short, but very important. I knew time was very important, but God reminded me what was more important through a fortune cookie. One time my daughter and I were enjoying lunch at our favorite Chinese restaurant, and the fortune cookie read, "Time is precious, but truth is more precious than time." I glued it onto a piece of paper, and I keep it in my Bible, thankful and grateful to God for all the truth he has shown me over the years. In 2009, I started attending another local SDA church. In 2018, I became the head deaconess. Not that I wanted to, but the lady was getting remarried and leaving the state, and no one was there to take the position, so I moved into it. But what I didn't realize when I signed up for it, that this position also included a seat on the church board. And I hate board meetings, they're so boring. Excuse me. But I definitely learned a lot. About the same time, a new person started attending our church, and he taught us about the one true God and what the church really believes about the Trinity. We started doing Bible studies after church to learn more about it, but the church board did not like it. And they told me at a board meeting that I would have to move Bible study elsewhere. I was incredulous. I said, "Wait a minute. You're asking us to stop studying the Bible at church?" They felt threatened that we were studying a topic that was against the church's beliefs. And so we moved our study to the library down the street, and we studied there after church in a private room until they closed at 5 p.m. We eventually moved it to someone's house so that we could study for longer hours. Now at church, we had 2 3-hour sessions at the church board meetings, where they continued to harass me about my beliefs. They said it was heresy and my own private interpretation. And it was after one of these long meetings that I was exasperated. And I prayed to God that if he has given me the gift of exhortation, then please speak through me. Use my hands, use my lips, work through me to write a message to these members. And God answered that prayer. I started to get a whole bunch of Bible verses just coming to me quickly. And so I wrote them all down. And then I looked each one up and I started typing. I wrote for about a week, and then I edited for a few more days. And then I sent it to our little group, study group, for their input. And they insisted that it was good enough that I should send it to all the church members. Now, I had not intended that. I had only intended it to send it to the board members. And so I wasn't sure what to do. You know, I was scared that, you know, I'd be doing something I shouldn't be doing. And I was really worried. And I usually don't ask God for a sign, but I felt that I really needed a sign. I really needed to know what to do in this case. And so I remember it was a Sunday night. I prayed right before going to bed that the Lord would show me a sign to know his will, whether I should send this letter to all the church members or only to the board members. And so the next morning was Monday, and my routine was to listen to 3 ABN house calls at 7 a.m. I love that show. It's a great show, although I haven't listened to it in a long time. I was surprised when I woke up that morning to see that I had slept in, and it was now 7:22 a.m. I quickly turned on my phone and went to their website just in time to hear Pastor John Stanton say, "If you have a gift for the edification of the church and you do not use it, that is a sin." He said some other things about it, but I don't remember what it was, but it was clear what I had to do. And I praised God and thanked him for answering my prayer and making it so clear. So I printed the letters up and I handed them to the individual board members, and then I emailed them to all the church members. So I actually had it typed up. And then I left. I had a trip planned to go to Maryland to house sit for my daughter and son-in-law. And at that time, I also took the opportunity to visit the SBA headquarters in Silver Springs. I took the tour, and I also dropped off a letter for the president and one for the BRI, the Bible Research Institute. They said they would have an answer for me, but I never received one. Meanwhile, at church, I was told that I had abused my privileges by using the church directory for my email addresses. I was asked as head deaconess to resign, but I refused as I felt that God had put me there for a purpose. And so the board had a spiritual board meeting on Sabbath afternoon and voted me off. The next month, our group arranged to have Natterman Stewart come and give a presentation over the weekend because he was in the States doing his rounds. And unfortunately, though, we did not have a good turnout. Maybe we didn't do enough advertising soon enough. But the church was really upset with us and accused us of trying to steal members away. So the church decided to hold a business meeting for all members to decide how best to move forward despite our differences in the Godhead. When we arrived at the church on August 12, 2018 for the business meeting, I knew we were in trouble, but there was a stranger outside waiting for the proceedings to begin. I correctly guessed he was from the conference to orchestrate the meeting. I had naively hoped that this meeting would end in more Bible study to see what is truth and what is error, and to unite us in faith according to the word. But it quickly became clear that it was a tribunal, as we were not allowed to record the meeting or even speak about what the true dividing issue was, our church's doctrine. At that meeting, we all had to sign in, and almost all the church members were sitting on the left side of the church, and the 8 of us were on the right side, except for 3 other members who always like to sit in their usual spots. The stranger introduced himself from the conference and said he was there to act as the chairman and facilitate the proceedings. He said that we would try to finish all business within 2 hours, and then the members were repeatedly reminded that they had previously voted for all the church's current leadership and that they need to stand behind them today in their recommendations and decisions. Then the head elder came up and he reviewed the recent history of events. He showed a copy of the flyer advertising the weekend Bible seminar with Natter. He said it was sent to all church members as a means to lure members away from the church and leave the church empty on Sabbath morning. The elder continued to say that our group has harassed other members and caused constant interruptions in Sabbath school and even church services. Therefore, the church board has decided it is necessary to disfellowship 8 members for the sake of unity for our church. There was some evidence presented from the church manual to prove the necessity of disfellowshipping the members, something about not following the church's authority. And then it was open for discussion. I apologized if my letter offended anyone, but that I was just sharing Bible truth that I had discovered through the study, and that I was surprised by this meeting, as I felt we were moving forward just fine, despite our differences. I asked for a show of hands who felt harassed by my email, and just a small handful of people raised their hands. One lady said she felt like we wanted to be kicked out, as if it's a badge of honor or something. But this couldn't be further from the truth. This message is the straight testimony that is causing the shaking. It is the first angel's message. Worship God, not an image falsely set up by Satan. We have to stand on biblical truth and not blindly follow man's doctrine. Jesus warned us in John 16 that his followers would be kicked out of the synagogue because the leaders do not know the Father or Jesus. After a short 30 minutes of discussion, a member requested that we stop discussion and vote. Well, 5 others had had their hands up already when this occurred, and so the chairman proceeded to hand out ballots for voting. One member objected that the 5 who had their hands up should be allowed to speak. This was voted on, and they allowed for each one to speak in turn. And he also mentioned that all members to vote in a way that they will be able to sleep at night. Someone mentioned that there wasn't an 8th church, which is rightly so. But remember, the church is not the building, but the people who know their God and love the truth and follow the Lamb wherever he goes. The ballots were counted. 25 yes to disfellowship, and 11 no's, and 3 blanks. And even one that voted to oust 2 members but keep the rest. One woman walked out. The chairman then spoke about brotherly love, which I found so odd since they just kicked out their brethren out of the church for believing differently on the Godhead. The pastor closed with prayer in tears, commenting that he had never had to deal with this situation in all his 44 years as a pastor. Next on the agenda was a discussion whether they would entertain installing a cell tower within the steeple. So our group got up and walked outside, and I stayed behind, hoping I could hand out some more copies of my letter and say goodbye. Most people were still warm to me and gave me hugs and shed some tears. One lady shook her head at me. Another one shook her finger in my face and said that I had time to repent, and I refused. It was a very, very sad day. Another member asked the chairman if the situation happens very often, and the chairman replied, "It's rare." I think as time goes on, though, it will not be a rare occurrence. As the truth spreads throughout the world, more and more people will be standing up for Jesus and his word. And I would like to point out that any rights we had as members were not taken into consideration. We were not told that we were under disciplinary action prior to the meeting, and we were told not to speak at all about doctrine or the Godhead. And so I have an excerpt here I'm going to read to you from the SDA Church Manual, page 65. And the paragraph is called Fundamental Rights of the Members. And it reads, "Members have a fundamental right to prior notification of the disciplinary meeting and the right to be heard in their own defense, introduce evidence, and produce witnesses. No church should vote to discipline a member under circumstances that deprive the member of these rights. Written notice must be given at least 2 weeks before the meeting and include the reasons for the disciplinary hearing." Nevertheless, the tribunal was carried out and we were now out of the church. So we started meeting every Sabbath for potluck and studying at a home church. And this went on for 4 months until it was brought to our attention that Andy, who was leading studies, was part of the shepherd's rod. And he was trying to lure us into believing that doctrine. I had never heard of shepherd's rod, so I had to study up to see what that was about. So we had a confrontation. I asked Andy if he believed Victor Houdiff was the Elijah, and he said yes. So we decided that we couldn't continue these Bible studies, and so our group split up. And that was around Christmas, and so we decided afterwards to continue meeting at the home church in the new year 2019, our very small remnant group. And then they chose me to lead out. It was a good experience for me, but things at home were not going well. And after a particularly bad fight, it was clear that I had to leave my husband. And so I got a divorce attorney in California to represent me. And then I moved to Savannah, Georgia, to be near my kids and grandchildren. I've attended the SDA church here and it is asleep. I currently attend 2 different Bible studies at the local community Sunday church. I don't attend on Sunday, but I share truth whenever the opportunity arises. And that's where I'm at now. To God be the glory. I would like to share one thing. This book is very well written, and I'd like to share it with you. It's Satan's All-Time Greatest Deception. It is written by a lifelong lay SDA pastor who came into the one true God message late in life, and he wrote this book when he was about 80 years old. You can find it at the acronym SATGB.org for $20. Anyways, that's my testimony.
Oh, praise God. Amazing. Let me just turn off the stop live